To this point, you've worked to get clear on your priorities and to discover whether or not your new product idea is strong enough to proceed, or if additional refinement might be needed. You then work to gather critical information about your consumer, the competition, and other key areas necessary to position yourself to win in the marketplace. Your development schedule will help guide your activities, and you built an aspirational target product image to serve as a beacon for the upcoming design, engineering, and branding efforts. The time and effort needed to get to this point largely depends on the complexity of your project and the number of unknowns needing to be resolved. But a few focused weeks is often sufficient to get ready to kick off the actual development work. This relatively small amount of invested time can save you many months and countless dollars in the long run. It helps you avoid the expensive rework that often comes from moving forward with good intentions rather than good information. The development stage is where the rubber meets the road and what most people think of when working to commercialize a new product idea. It's what many consider to be the sexy, fun part of the journey, where you get to develop patents, flesh out designs, build CAD images and 3D models, define your branding, packaging, and complete all of the other aspects necessary to produce your product. If you intend to manufacture your idea and to compete in the marketplace, the development stage concludes with finding a suitable manufacturer and locking down your specific manufacturing costs. If you intend to license or sell your idea outright, the end of the development could be marked by the creation of a demonstration model and building a compelling communication targeting your ideal licensing or buying prospects. Let's get back to our panel of experts and explore this exciting work.
Items. And maybe Joshua, maybe that's a beautiful place to start with you, which is I would think that this is where things get hot and heavy in terms of the patent work that needs to be done. And again, initially I would think that you deal a lot with technical folks and who are the engineers and who are the designers and what's their relationship. But when I was talking to you earlier, you talked about, no, your relationship with marketing is also very important. So maybe you can, set us up a little bit as we now are getting to the actual putting pen to paper and starting to do this work. What does that patent story now look like, and what do people need to think about?
Sure, Joe. And you're absolutely right. Most of my relations and dealings are with the engineers, the scientists, the people who are going to do the work, the people who are going to develop the product. Absolutely. But I did talk about marketers. Why is that? Because very often the marketers will help guide product development. They'll go to the engineers, they'll go to the scientists, and they'll say, look, I know you're working in this general field. You're working generally in toothbrushes. We've been doing a lot of market research and we've been talking to our customers. And now there's a real need. I'll use your earlier example for toothbrushes with a very wide grip so that kids can use them, right? That might not have been where the researchers were heading towards, where the engineers were headed towards. But now that it has been pointed out to them by marketing, they suddenly say, oh, we can do this. This is actually a really great idea. Why didn't I think of this before? Anybody can design a product. The key here is designing a product that the marketplace wants. That's why it's important for all the different parts of the company, all the different people who are involved to have a say, to have some impact, to be able to bring their voice to the discussion. I also told you a story, Joe, of a client I had a number of years ago who did skincare products. And they came to me to do some work for them. And I didn't do the work for them for 9 months, right? They wanted me to do this big search to see, can we sell our product? And I kept telling them, look, you don't have a product yet. You have an idea. I'm not going to tell you and do all this work, spend all your money to see if you have freedom for a product when you don't have a product. You have an idea. Eventually, after 9 months of me yelling at them, essentially, they came back and said, okay, here's what we want you to do. We want you to do the search, but instead of telling us, can we sell our product, tell us what specific design decisions we need to avoid other people's patents. I said, okay, you're giving me a real clear task, something that makes sense, that I can do. because it isn't just about what can you do scientifically and what can you do technically. It's what can you do with those decisions in those different areas that will result in the end goal. And what's the end goal? A product that will sell.
Yeah, and as you talk about, probing and asking them and pushing back on the client, I think that's a great form of tough love that you're doing, because I think there's a lot of folks that wouldn't do that, that they would just look at it as a job and as, a little bit of money coming into the organization, and letting those tough questions kind of go by the wayside. And I think you do them a great service by having the uncomfortable conversations and asking the things that need to be asked so that they can be accurate. But Joshua, so now we've gotten to a point now to where we've got an initial kind of a design, and maybe there's been some initial engineering work and a sanity check and the parts list in the form of a bill of materials. Now they're coming back and actually re-engaging with you, or what's the ideal way you want them to show up as they're going through this actual design and engineering process?
Well, Joe, a lot will depend on where we are in the process from my perspective. So if we've already filed a patent application, which happens more often than not, which is the way it should be, we will want to make sure that whatever that final design they came up with is actually covered by what's already filed. Depending on what path the progression took to get to that final product, it might be covered, it might have gone in a different direction. We really don't know until we look at it. And if nobody ever comes to us with, hey, here's our final product, can you make sure it's covered? We're not going to know one way or the other, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's covered, whether it's not, whether there's more work to be done. A lot of people, clients, companies don't think about that because everybody has their own lane that they stay in, and they don't think outside of that lane. I'm doing my job and I'm moving it on to the next person. You really need a project manager, somebody who's going to take ownership of the whole thing to make sure that the right people are looking at the right stages. If it does come to us and say, hey, can you check this? What are the three things I could say? Well, I could say, yes, you're fine, just go ahead. I could say, well, it's covered, but it's different than what we filed on before. So you might want to file something new to take advantage of those tweaks you made, those new improvements, because those could each be separate inventions from your original concept. Or the third thing I could say is, wow, you really changed this entirely. It's not covered by what we filed already. We need to get something new on file ASAP before you go on to the next step. And really, those are the three different things that might happen.
Yeah, my mind goes to timing once again, and now I envision that and we're going to come back and talk more here about the design, engineering, and patent work. But let's fast forward and say we're ready now to release specs to a manufacturer and full-blown files and everything's good to go. Where are we in the patent process, just based on the timing that is out of our control? One of the bubbles I have to burst with new clients almost immediately is this concept of how long does it take to really commercialize a new product idea? And most people believe it's a 3-month, 4-month type of a thing. And the reality is, okay, the first discovery and define work can largely be paper exercise and can be done in a couple of months. The actual development work of actually developing it and get to the point of specs release can be anywhere from 4 months, 6 months, 12 months to get to it. And then the back end of the manufacturing could be another, 3-4 months, whatever it might be. So if we are essentially at the end of the stage, we are officially 10 months into the development work. Do they have a patent in hand? Has it been issued? Where do you think they are by the time they are releasing specs to a manufacturer?
That's an excellent question. And it will really depend on two things: how early in the process they got started with filing their patent application, and exactly how they filed their patent application. On average, from the time you file your patent application, it's going to take 2 to 4 years to get a patent. Think about that. If you're talking, Joe, about 10 months to develop the product and have the specs built up, and I'm saying 2 to 4 years to get a patent, those two numbers don't match up unless you really start early in the process to try to get a patent. One thing we do for some of our clients that really truncates that and really gives you more options is to file our patent applications with a prioritized examination request. What does that mean? It means if you pay an extra fee to the government, and it's purely a government fee, that's all it is. Again, the government taking more money from you, you get taken out of turn. So what on average takes 2 to 4 years from filing to patent grant, you're now guaranteed to be through the process within 1 year. And we're routinely through the process in 6 to 9 months. Is that a guarantee you're going to have a patent? No, it's not, because you still need to meet all the other requirements for getting a patent. But if you're willing to pay that extra money, you'll know by the time you're ready to go to market, do we have a patent or not? And if not, you know what sort of adjustments you need to make.
Yeah, it reminds me of a conversation I was having with Howard earlier, which is this idea that what a horrible scenario would be is that if you spend all of this money on your assets and your web page and what's printed on your packaging, and you come back and because of some screw up with the trademark process, or you tried to go it alone, all of a sudden you realize you can't use that name and you can't use the assets that you paid for and developed. What a horrible thing that would be. And as I think about it again in the world of patents and IP, that's tenfold as important that you get it, which once again, I think it's very important that you get to that clear, defined stage at the end of the development work so that by the time you're releasing specs, you don't have these unanswered questions that could upset the apple cart in terms of the patent process. And while there's definitely risks and things can go, bump in the night unexpectedly, don't release the stuff in a way that you find that, you're either, worst case scenario, perhaps you're infringing on somebody else. But again, I think that timing piece is so very important to get correct because there is going to be that overlap and you're not going to have that issued on the time frame, before you release to manufacturing.
I couldn't agree more, Joe. And a lot also depends on the type of product you're making. If you're in the software business, for example, all the value of your patent, all the value of your product is going to be at the front end before technology moves on to the next big thing. If you're in the pharmaceutical industry, all the value of your product, all the value of your patent is at the back end. After you make it through the FDA regulatory approval process, you've completed your clinical trials, all of that. It often takes 15, 16 years in product development before you have a product you can bring to market. So a lot will also depend on what's your business, what type of product do you have, and how can we steer you in the right direction in a way that makes sense for your business, for your overall long-term business strategy and your product strategy. So 2 points. Number one, anytime you're bringing your idea to somebody else to work on, you want to make sure you're protected in terms of an NDA or something like that. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday. He called me up and said, hey, I've been talking with this one company. There's the second company who's interested. Should I talk with them? And I said, well, does the first company have any rights to what you're doing yet? No, not yet. We're still very early stages. We're still in the discussion. Okay, then you're okay to talk to the second company, but you have to have an NDA with them before you tell them anything. And I kept repeating to them, you have to have an NDA with them. And he, at one point he said to me, well, how important is that? I said, let me put it to you like this. If you ask for an NDA and the company comes back to you and says, yeah, no, we don't do that. It's either just tell us or not. You're so much better walking away from that potential opportunity. They're trying to pull something over on you. They're trying to get away with something. They're trying to take your idea from you. Never, ever work with anybody who objects to that very basic step. The second thing I would say, and this applies especially to the scenario Brian was just talking about, where you're dealing with somebody overseas, you really want to, as much as possible, work with somebody that you know, or that has come recommended to you, or that you have some reason to trust. If you're working with somebody in China or Vietnam or India or wherever, and you have no idea who they are, what they're doing, they could be giving you exactly what you want and also doing the exact same thing for themselves out of the back of their shop. You have to make sure you know the reputations of who you're working with, that you have some reasonable certainty that they're going to do what they say and not do things that they're not telling you. Is there ever guarantees? Is there ever 100% certainty that that's going to be what's happening? Of course not. But you have to at least give yourself a chance.
Joshua, that's such tremendous information.
I'm glad to hear it.
Oh, I heard okay, excuse me. I can't believe that I didn't bring up NDAs earlier. So thank you for saving me for myself. The idea of a non-disclosure agreement is so very vital and so very important. And a lot of people, it swings both ways. They either get very conservative, that it's the perfect NDA, or we're not going to talk. And then you get other people on the other end, which are so flippant about it that they don't even think that it's important, and the nightmare scenario unfolds that you described. So let's do this. We've got a few minutes left in this section, and maybe, Joshua, starting with you, anything that you'd like to leave with the audience, or core thoughts or things that you think are important as people think about, IP and patents, and I think if we talk again about licensing an item or selling your idea versus producing it, I think that IP protection is a must-have if we talk about a licensing or sale path versus probably a must-have in the manufacturing, but maybe it's more of a nice-have, and it's a risk situation of, are you willing to give everything away? Again, I don't want to take away your time answering and speaking to that, but what are your closing thoughts and things that you would like to leave with the audience?
Well, Joe, I'll go back to something you said earlier on, and that is you really need to have an idea of where you're headed. If you don't know where you're going, wherever you wind up is going to be fine, because let's face it, you're just going to be somewhere. IP is a tool. Patents are a tool. They're not an end goal in and of themselves. They're a way to help protect the company, help protect your markets, help generate revenue. That's it. Nobody goes into the business with the idea of, I'm in the business of developing patents. Patents is a way to get to where you want to go. So if you're looking to manufacture and sell product, absolutely you want to have that patent. So any competition you face doesn't directly compete with you, doesn't directly take your ideas from you. If it takes you 5 years and $500 million to develop whatever product you have, why would you want to give that away for free? Makes no sense whatsoever. Maybe your strategy is, a startup pharma company strategy. I want to develop the technology to a certain level and get bought out. Have big pharma come in, take me over. And this isn't just pharma, it's the example I'm using.
Yeah.
You absolutely need to have a patent portfolio, or else you're never going to get to the stage where you're going to get bought out. Anybody who's going to look at you says, well, what's your IP protection look like? Oh, you don't have one, you haven't thought about it. Either the conversation ends there, or your ass goes way down beyond what you thought. And the third, if you're developing patents along the way, even if they're ideas, products that you don't use anymore, you're never going to use, maybe you can license those patents out and develop revenue that way. So patents can be used in a lot of different ways. The one time they can't be used, if you develop your technology, you put it out there, you publish it, you give it to people, it's too late. There's no patent anymore and you have nothing.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Joshua. I appreciate it. And all of NGM's contact information and more information about you guys is going to be part of the information that's going to be released to all attendees. So thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate it. You've brought a wealth of information to the table that I know is very valuable.